Welcome. I'm hoping the stormy conditions don't come through too much. It's a lot of rain and wind. So instead of, I was wanting to perhaps do a bit of a journal episode along with the reading of A New Earth, but perhaps I can record that as a separate episode. Might be best. And for this one we can focus on picking up where we left off. And before we begin reading, perhaps we can just take a moment to settle. Whatever part of your day, whether it's the end of your day or the beginning, just a moment to let go of anything you have to do or anything you've done. And it's appreciating and acknowledging, connecting with this moment. Almost as a brand new moment, which can only be done with presence. So we've reached chapter 6. And the title of the chapter is called Breaking Free. And as per usual, I'll be reading one passage at a time, perhaps 2 or 3 if they're relatively short. And this is the chapter that follows chapter 5, the pain body. So, breaking free. The beginning of freedom from the pain body lies first of all in the realization that you have a pain body. Then, more important, in your ability to stay present enough, alert enough to notice the pain body, to notice the pain body in yourself as a heavy influx of negative emotion when it becomes active. When it is recognized, it can no longer pretend to be you and live and renew itself through you. It is your conscious presence that breaks the identification with the pain body. When you don't identify with it, the pain body can no longer control your thinking, and so cannot renew itself any more by feeding on your thoughts. The pain body in most cases does not dissolve immediately, but once you have severed the link between it and your thinking, the pain body begins to lose energy. Your thinking ceases to be clouded by emotion. Your present perceptions are no longer distorted by the past. The energy that was trapped in the pain body then changes its vibrational frequency and is transmuted into presence. In this way, the pain body becomes fuel for consciousness. This is why many of the wisest, most enlightened men and women on our planet once had a heavy pain body. regardless of what you say or do or what face you show to the world. Your mental emotional state cannot be concealed. Every human being emanates an energy field that corresponds to his or her inner state, and most people can sense it, although they may feel someone else's energy emanation only subliminally. That is to say, they don't know that they sense it, yet it determines to a large extent how they feel about and react to that person. Some people are most clearly aware of it when they first meet someone, even before any words are exchanged. A little later, however, words take over the relationship, and with words come the roles that most people play. Attention then moves to the realm of mind, and the ability to sense the other person's energy field becomes greatly diminished. Nevertheless, it is still felt on an unconscious level. When you realize that pain bodies unconsciously seek more pain, that is to say, that they want something bad to happen, you will understand that many traffic accidents are caused by drivers whose pain bodies are active at the time. When two drivers with active pain bodies arrive at an intersection at the same time, the likelihood of an accident is many times greater than under normal circumstances. Unconsciously, they both want the accident to happen. The role of pain bodies in traffic accidents is most obvious in the phenomenon called road rage, when drivers become physically violent, often over a trivial matter, such as someone in front of them driving too slowly. Many acts of violence are committed by normal people who temporarily turn into maniacs. All over the world, at court proceedings, you hear the defense lawyers say, "This is totally out of character," and the accused, "I don't know what came over me." To my knowledge so far, no defense lawyer has said to the judge, although the day may not be far off, "This is a case of diminished responsibility. My client's pain body was activated, and he did not know what he was doing. In fact, he didn't do it. His pain body did." Does this mean that people are not responsible for what they do when possessed by the pain body? My answer is, how can they be? How can you be responsible when you are unconscious, when you don't know what you are doing? However, in the greater scheme of things, human beings are meant to evolve into conscious beings, and those who don't will suffer the consequences of their unconsciousness. They are out of alignment with the evolutionary impulse of the universe. And even that is only relatively true. From a higher perspective, it is not possible to be out of alignment with the evolution of the universe. And even human unconsciousness and the suffering it generates is part of that evolution. When you can't stand the endless cycle of suffering anymore, you begin to awaken. So the pain body too has its necessary place in the larger picture. And the next passage is titled Presence. A woman in her 30s came to see me. As she greeted me, I could sense the pain behind her polite and superficial smile. She started telling me her story, and within 1 second her smile changed into a grimace of pain. Then she began to sob uncontrollably. She said she felt lonely and unfulfilled. There was much anger and sadness. As a child, she had been abused by a physically violent father. I saw quickly that her pain was not caused by her present life circumstances, but by an extraordinarily heavy pain body. Her pain body had become the filter through which she viewed her life situation. She was not yet able to see the link between the emotional pain and her thoughts, being completely identified with both. She could not yet see that she was feeding the pain body with her thoughts. In other words, she lived with the burden of a deeply unhappy self. At some level, however, she must have realized that her pain originated within herself, that she was a burden to herself. She was ready to awaken, and this is why she had come. I directed the focus of her attention to what she was feeling inside her body, and asked her to sense the emotion directly, instead of through the filter of her unhappy thoughts, her unhappy story. She said she had come expecting me to show her the way out of her unhappiness, not into it. Reluctantly, however, she did what I asked her to do. Tears were rolling down her face. Her whole body was shaking. At this moment, this is what you feel, I said. There is nothing you can do about the fact that at this moment, this is what you feel. Now, instead of wanting this moment to be different from the way it is, which adds more pain to the pain that is already there, is it possible for you to completely accept that this is what you feel right now? She was quiet for a moment. Suddenly, she looked impatient, as if she was about to get up, and said angrily, "No, I don't want to accept this." "Who is speaking?" I asked her. "You or the unhappiness in you? Can you see that your unhappiness about being unhappy is just another layer of unhappiness?" She became quiet again. "I am not asking you to do anything. All I'm asking is that you find out whether it is possible for you to allow those feelings to be there. In other words, and this may sound strange, if you don't mind being unhappy, what happens to the unhappiness? Don't you want to find out?" She looked puzzled briefly, and after a minute or so of sitting silently, I suddenly noticed a significant shift in her energy field. She said, "This is weird. I'm still unhappy, but now there is space around it. It seems to matter less." This was the first time I heard somebody put it like that. There is space around my unhappiness. That space, of course, comes when there is inner acceptance of whatever you are experiencing in the present moment. I didn't say much else, allowing her to be with the experience. Later, she came to understand that the moment she stopped identifying with the feeling, the old painful emotion that lived in her, the moment she put her attention on it directly without trying to resist it, it can no longer control her thinking, and so become mixed up with a mentally constructed story called the unhappy me. Another dimension had come into her life that transcended her personal past, the dimension of presence. Since you cannot be unhappy without an unhappy story, this was the end of her unhappiness. Emotion in itself is not unhappiness. Only emotion plus an unhappy story is unhappiness. When our session came to an end, it was fulfilling to know that I had just witnessed the arising of presence in another human being. The very reason for our existence in human form is to bring that dimension of consciousness into the world. I had also witnessed a diminishment of the pain body, not through fighting it, but through bringing the light of consciousness to it. A few minutes after my visitor left, a friend arrived to drop something off. As soon as she came into the room, she said, "What happened here? The energy feels heavy and murky. It almost makes me feel sick. You need to open the windows, burn some incense." I explained that I had just witnessed a major release in someone with a very dense pain body, and that what she felt must be some of the energy that was released during our session. My friend, however, didn't want to stay and listen. She wanted to get away as soon as possible. I opened the windows and went out to have dinner at a small Indian restaurant nearby. What happened there was a clear further confirmation of what I already knew, that on some level all seemingly individual human pain bodies are connected. Although the form this particular confirmation took did come as a shock. And that brings us to the end of that passage. And as I was reading chapter 6, it's incredible how in just a sentence or two we are talking about something that's so profound. You know, what we often think that's profound is, especially at an early age, is facts and incredible knowledge about something, and to a certain extent there is profoundness in that, in the size of space and an innumerable amount of facts and interesting knowledge, but the direct experience of who we truly are, and especially when there is a great deal of pain, it is almost like a very precious jewel that we are reading, that we are following. And the jewel is in the teachings, in the pointings. And we can begin at the first sentence of chapter 6, Breaking Free, where it says, the beginning of freedom from the pain body lies, first of all, in the realization that you have a pain body. And it is a great realization. And it's something, unless you are in a spiritual community, it is something, it's clear to see how rare this realization is when we look at the people around us. Even those who may have an interest in some sort of spiritual practice, it's still a rarity that someone acknowledges and is aware of their pain body. And Eckhart gives the key to help your pain body. And he says it is your conscious presence that breaks the identification with the pain body. So the pain body is wanting you to identify with the emotional pain and thoughts together. And it happens so quickly, so I'm sure many of you can personally attest to just suddenly being in the pain body and realizing how long it's been without noticing. And I can talk in my own experience where it's that strong, where I can see it coming, but yet still it takes over me. And then there are the most terrifying thoughts about my life situation and what the world means and where I fit into it. And he says the pain body in most cases does not dissolve immediately. So we all have our own, the heaviness of our pain bodies are all different, and for some, we each almost have our own timeline of when that dissolving takes place. If it's a gradual dissolving over a certain amount of time, or for some it may be a very short and intense experience. And by not allowing yourself to be clouded by emotion, and where your present perceptions are no longer distorted by the past, where you're almost concocting this story and attaching the emotions to it. So by being aware of this, of the makeup and the way the pain body comes up and feeds on our thinking, then the pain body begins to lose energy because you are no longer adding to the pain body. And it says the energy that was trapped in the pain body then changes its vibrational frequency and is transmuted into presence. And it says this is why many of the wisest, most enlightened men and women on our planet once had a heavy pain body, because it became so, the suffering was so strong that there was no choice but to go deeper within. There was no choice but to disidentify with the emotional pain and the thoughts attached to it. And I quite enjoy the examples Eckhart gives. Earlier in the book, he was talking about a client he was seeing, as if it was within his counselling practice, when a woman was talking about a lost ring, I think. And here we see a woman with a heavy pain body that comes here, and Eckhart directs her focus, her attention to what she's feeling inside her body, and to sense the emotion directly, instead of through the filter of her unhappy thoughts. So this can only be done with the awareness, with the attention, fully on the sensations of the pain. And from this process, a spaciousness opened up around her unhappiness. So the unhappiness was there, but it was no longer suffocated by thoughts and interlocked and tangled with her past and perceptions. There was now space around it. And one of the most, when I talked about the incredible, profound sentence, for me it was this, that the very reason for our existence in human form is to bring that dimension of consciousness into this world. So it is to awaken in the present moment. And often that reading pointing such as that, it takes away all of what we feel is important in our life situation, or what we often call our life. And it almost dissolves in that moment, knowing that just this present moment, this moment of now, being consciously aware in this moment is the only importance, the true importance, when everything else is relatively important. And by following this pointing, for me it gives me that space around the unhappiness, the unhappy life situation. And just stepping back a little previous in this passage, Eckhart mentioned about his visitor that it was also the beginning of the end of this woman's pain body. That emotion in itself is not unhappiness. Only emotion plus an unhappy story is unhappiness. So by this distinction, it means there's no adding to the pain body. When the pain body arises, it's again just being with the emotion. Feeling the emotion, but not identifying with it, meaning there's an unhappy story. There's the unhappiness, which is you and what you've been through. And then there's the feeding, almost that cycle of adding more pain. And now each time the pain body rises, when there's conscious awareness, there is dissolving happening. I found it quite interesting at the end of this passage when Eckhart mentions their friend coming into the room and feeling the palpable energy change, the heaviness. And the next, when we return to a new earth, we will continue on with chapter 6 and the passage titled The Return of the Pain Body. So I'm sure we can all relate to that as well. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and I will speak to you again very soon. Take care.